Fossils,
Fossils,
fossils and
fossils and
fiction.
fiction.
Welcome back to Fossils and Fiction. We're here on another vaguely sunny Melbourne day to bring you some interesting dinosaur-related content. Travis, how are you doing today?
Yeah, pretty well, Alyssa. We've got for this episode to talk about an interview that I conducted with Shannon at the National Dinosaur Museum here in Canberra. We're going to talk about a fantastic paper with a really cool specimen that's come out of Queensland. And briefly, we're going to preview the end of Oak Street. So the new dino film. Good to see more dino media out there. So yeah, this should be a fun episode.
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, there's been a resurgence in dinosaurs in media lately. I know we've also seen them in Star Trek Strange New Worlds season 4 premiere. I have not personally seen that yet. I'm still one season behind on Star Trek, but I did hear that episode had puppets. So, I'm always here to see dinosaurs, especially if they are played by puppets, especially if those puppets are damp. A damp dinosaur puppet is peak.
I'm always excited for new dinosaur media as well, but that excitement got tempered a little bit when 65 came out because that was just a terrible movie.
Yes. I remember Jake Katevsky and I and another colleague, Rory Duncan, we were all flying to Paleo Down Under 3, and Jake was sat next to me watching that film on the airplane flight from Melbourne
hmm
to Perth. And I don't need to see that movie because I've just seen Jake's commentary, which largely consisted of him going, "Oh, what? Oh, no, I can't, no."
I went to the cinema to watch 65, and look, it's prehistoric jungles with things vaguely resembling dinosaurs running around attacking humans. So, that kind of works. Like from just about any angle, that kind of works. But I couldn't believe how bad it was and how bad the plot was. And it was so bad that I went back and saw it again about a week later just to confirm that it was as bad as I thought it was the first time.
I gave them money twice just to confirm it was that bad.
Exactly. Anyway, I'm hoping End of Oak Street shouldn't be that bad. I've seen a couple of gripes out there about it, but ultimately I think people think it's pretty okay, and it's got a pretty stacked cast. So we'll get onto that, but let's have a look at this Cretaceous turducken from Queensland.
This was a publication coming out of Richmond here in Australia talking about fossil evidence for an animal eating another animal and then a third animal eating the animal that ate the first animal. So a true natural turducken, if you will.
We just have to get our own turducken thing in there, which is of course is an American gastronomic marvel. The paper is called "Beneath the Waves: Extraordinary Dietary Insights from a Dismembered Ichthyosaur from the Lower Cretaceous." So that is a really descriptive title, which I absolutely love as well. Sometimes paleo titles are quite dry, whereas in my field of media studies, we like to make puns and jokes in just about every title. Like it's almost compulsory.
As
But
one should.
yeah, exactly. But that's a really nice descriptive title. What they discovered here in Richmond in Queensland was a dismembered adult ichthyosaur. The species is Platypterygius australis. So it's about a 6 to 7 meter ichthyosaur. Now these are the dolphin-like, and when I say dolphin-like, they're convergent with dolphins, convergently evolved with dolphins to have that kind of shape on their bodies. Now, the Platypterygius had gut contents which illustrate what it was eating, and those gut contents consisted of, I mentioned before, fish, but also cephalopods and pterosaur bones. So it evidences that it was eating pterosaurs as well as the fish and the cephalopods in the gut contents. But then the Platypterygius's skeleton had been chewed on by probably a pliosaur, Kronosaurus queenslandicus. So this is one of those very large ocean-based predators that had chewed on this. So we have two marine reptiles having chewed on, one of them having chewed on a fish and a pterosaur, and one of them having chewed on the other one. So
Right.
effectively,
Okay.
it's a picture of a whole food web, which is really, really cool, I think. And it also shows, the pterosaur being involved in the marine feeding environment as well. So it's evidence that the pterosaurs were in and around the ocean, the Cretaceous ocean of inland Australia, which is fantastic because it just lends weight to what we had previously seen of some of these pterosaurs in that region. But yeah, it's really cool that you get to see so many interactions and food, as I say, food webs or trophic interactions, as they might say in the actual literature amongst these creatures, which I think is really really fantastic.
Yeah, and it's something that I think we're getting more and more of as the field of science and paleontology progresses, is better understandings of not just the bones that we're getting out, but what's contained in the impressions and the sediment around these bones. If you read the paper, which both of us have done, I think most of our listeners should be able to get at least some of the casually science communicated things. They might not have these diagrams in them, but one of the reasons that they were able to make these determinations is because so many of these bones were still in the sediments, which meant that they were better able to say, okay, this is definitely within this animal's stomach contents. This is the kind of sediment distributions and disturbances that we see. And it's probably something we'll see more and more of coming out of Australian paleontology, because so often we are forced to work with such fragmentary material that we do these very in-depth kind of analyses of what we find in terms of bite marks, in terms of damage to the bones. I think it's really exciting to see some of the fan art people have come up with for this as well. Like, there's a lot of illustrations of that food web you're talking about where, like, you've got the little fish, and then you've got the ichthyosaur, the kind of dolphin with giant eyeball, and then the Kronosaurus, which is like a little bit of like Lapras hungered for blood.
I could see Lapras. I want to reimagine Lapras now, the Pokemon, for those playing along at home,
Mm.
as a yeah, a very hungry pliosaur.
Yeah, it just opens its cute little mouth and it's all teeth.
Yeah,
Which, if our visitor or if anybody listening along at home is thinking about visiting Kronosaurus Corner, the art is getting a huge update at Kronosaurus Corner very soon. A friend of the channel, Zev Landis, and a couple of other artists have been working really hard on that. So if you like seeing predatory Lapras, there's another opportunity for you to do that very soon.
I think we're going to have to talk to Zev about doing some artwork that is predatory Lapras specifically.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah, that
eating
would be
our cute little
fantastic.
guys. Australovenator
So,
eating the trilobite, Lapras
oh
eating the
yeah,
Australovenator.
yeah, we just need to throw Australovenator in there as well. Absolutely, to give the whole the whole
Gotta have authenticity.
yeah, up and
You know,
down the board.
Cambrian trilobite, Cretaceous dinosaur, Cretaceous pliosaur. Pliosaur people don't.
We will share this paper in the show notes, but it was in Publishing Gondwana Research. Matt White was the lead author. Kevin Peterson's another author. He's the former curator of the museum, Kronosaurus Corner, there in Richmond. And also Maka Eichelmeier, who was on the show a couple of episodes back from
Yes.
Winton. She's also named as one of the authors on there. So well done to Matt, Kevin, and the other co-authors, which also include
Peter
Peter Trussler,
Trussler.
who's the
Yeah.
artist as well, and Joseph John Beathert. So yeah, really, really cool research. It points to as well, I think, something that we have been saying for a while, that a few others are saying. Australia is still a pretty underdeveloped place for paleontology, in that its representation in the global fossil record is still pretty poor compared to other very well studied continents, and particularly other well studied Western continents. And so it's really interesting to see all of these studies starting to come out of Australia and getting this kind of our own golden age of paleontology, or paleontological renaissance, the dinosaur renaissance of Australia happening here. I think it's pretty cool to see all these things happening. So
And speaking of dinosaur renaissance, you recently paid a visit to perhaps a lesser known museum of Australia's. Now that you've relocated to Canberra, you were able to visit a fantabulous institution down there. Why don't you tell us more about that?
yeah, so the National Dinosaur Museum here in Canberra has a really interesting kind of history. It's When you hear the terms National Dinosaur Museum in Canberra, which is Australia's capital, you would presume that this is a kind of big sandstone building with, research focused and paleontologists going everywhere. It's not that. I'll be really honest and upfront and say it's not that. It's a small private museum. They do conduct some research, but primarily their interest is in education and inspiration. And being a private museum, one of their major drivers is sales and the shop. We're still going to talk a little bit about that with the guest. But yeah, primarily their main job here in Canberra is to communicate with school kids. They're very family focused about dinosaur and paleontological science and get people inspired and interested. And so in that regard, more than most museums, they focus on models, animatronics, and artwork. But that's really great. We talk about that. I took a visit there a couple of months ago, just after I moved to Canberra. And then I've gone back in the last couple of weeks and sat down with Shannon, who is their outreach and education coordinator, a young guy, really enthusiastic. And there's part of this conversation where we go into Shannon's background, and I ask him, how he got involved and how he started working at the museum and where he wants to take it in his life. And it pointed out to me the role that these kind of institutions can have for somebody who doesn't have the pre-existing connections, who maybe doesn't even have an opportunity to get the formal education, because there's still only a handful of universities in Australia that do paleontology education and degrees. And so if you are not in a position to attend one of those, then you could find yourself locked out of those opportunities. But Shannon's story really shows how even a museum like this, which is maybe off the beaten path in terms of what we might typically talk about as education and research in the space, can actually really shine a light. And I mentioned to Shannon, but I'll highlight it again here, another former guest of the podcast, Sally Hurst, is also an ex-employee there. So she also got her start. And again, I hope Sally doesn't mind me sharing this. It's the story she's recounted on this podcast and elsewhere. But again, she came from a small country town. Her first kind of exposure, as I understand it, was through this museum. And then she's gone on to do great things in paleontology and particularly education and outreach. So yeah, here's the story of the National Dinosaur Museum as told by their education and outreach manager, Shannon. Shannon, g'day. Nice to chat.
It's lovely to see you.
Tell us about yourself. What do you do here at the National Dinosaur Museum in Canberra?
So I am our head of tour and gallery operations. So my primary job is I make sure all things in the gallery aren't broken. So I fix our animatronics, I fix our skeletons where possible. I acquire new ones if we need to, or replacement parts. But most of my job, 90% of it, is handling tours. So school groups, public groups, our tours that we run during the holidays. I write script, research, train all the guides. I handle all of that side of it mostly, the educational aspects of the museum.
Perfect stuff to jump on a podcast and tell us all about.
Yeah.
What is the National Dinosaur Museum?
So we're a small, privately owned museum out in Gold Creek in Canberra. Primarily, we're focused on prehistoric life, but also we have one of the largest collections of minerals and gemstones as well. I believe in Canberra, we might be Canberra's largest collection. Don't quote me on that. But we focus primarily on tourism. So people who come visit Canberra for, like, say, the ski season right now.
Yeah.
Have a lot of families rolling through, parents who maybe one parent's off skiing with the older kids and they bring the littlies to us.
It is a private museum. There's a bit of a difference between what we often think of in Australia as those big national state institutions. So what's it like being out here and running or being part of the team that runs a museum like this as a private institution, I guess, compared to those big research intensive places?
There's a few things that are really good about being private and a few things that make it a bit harder. We have a lot less red tape when it comes to things like developing our programs and doing our own research and even doing things like what we post on social media. There's a lot less oversight there. We haven't got to pass it through government officials or heads of marketing and things like that. But the trade-off for that is that those bigger museums also have bigger teams. They have bigger funding budgets. They have grants to do their own research, and they can hire specialized education officers and things. Whereas our tour guides are expected to be kind of jack of all trades. They have to be retail staff. They have to be able to do guides. Some of them have to do maintenance and garden things. And so we don't have that, quite that.
The specialization.
Specialization aspect. We have very much a lot of generalists in the museum.
Like yourself, you said you kind of do a bit of everything around the place, despite what your official title is. And you are, as you mentioned, kid-focused, entertainment-focused facility. What does some of that involve? Like, if somebody's coming to the front door, what are they going to experience on the day?
The first thing that almost everyone sees, and the school kids will happily tell you this, is obviously our gift shop. Again, being privately owned, we can have pretty much free reign to put whatever we want in our gift shop. We have an exceptionally large collection of toys and fossils and crystals, and I expect 90% of kids are the most excited by that.
Okay.
But once they get upstairs to the museum, we have our animatronics, we have our skeletals. We've just updated all of our signage to new formats. Those signs are designed so that kids can have a look and see exactly how big an animal is, what they look like, and where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And the adults, if they want, can go on the other side and read all the really complex, scientifically accurate information without having to like have the kids be trawling through that information themselves. So designed to be both easily accessible and also have a lot of information for those who are really curious.
Yeah. Yeah. With those animatronics that you mentioned, they roar and they move and then they're sitting alongside fossils. How do you see the museum integrating those two different types of display?
It's a very fine line to walk. You can ask any of my guides. Some of them really like the animatronics. They're really fun. The spectacle is really exciting. Yeah. Kids love them on school tours, especially. If we don't have them on, the kids beg to have them on. They love them. They draw people in. But whenever we have those animatronics, the line that we try to walk is we make sure that all of those animatronics, even if they aren't the most accurate nowadays, some of them are getting a bit on in age, that the information presented alongside them is as accurate as we can make it. Mm-hmm. All of our signs are updated at least once a year, if not 2 to 3 times a year. Whenever new information comes out, we're constantly trawling for it, trying to catch it and put it out as soon as we can.
Okay.
We have our skeletons that sit alongside the animatronics. So it's very rare that you will see an animatronic in the museum that doesn't have a fossil or a skeleton or a skull or some sort of replica fossil nearby.
Yeah. Tell me about the tours that you run. How do they work?
There is a lot of work that goes into the back end of those tours. So we have had a base tour for a long time. We've been doing tours pretty much since the museum opened in the 1990s. But since then, we are constantly building on and editing. And as we get new displays and new things roll in and new information, for example, the Nanotyrannus information that came out last year wiped out a large chunk of our T-Rex information. All of our stuff about T-Rex ontogeny, gone. So 90% of my day when I'm not doing stuff up in the gallery is just spent trawling like Google Scholar, Sci-Hub, looking for new papers, new information, making sure the information we do have hasn't gone out of date. Okay. So a lot of it is going back and reading those old papers our information came from, checking who cited them and whether they've been disproven or debunked or there are people talking about it.
Yeah.
So it got ear to the ground constantly. It's hours and hours of research synthesis for maybe this much. You can ask any of my tour guides, the booklet they get when they come is like 40, 50 pages thick of just information about everything in the museum. So they're not expected to know the whole book back to front. It's there so that they have their essentials they have to talk about. And if a kid asks them a really insane question, something to do with some really obscure thing, for example, we have a replica fossil animal called Limnoscelis. It's like a small little basal reptilomorph. If my tour guides didn't know about that, it's in the booklet, so they can go down and find it after when they need. But it is a lot of effort. It takes hours to train tour guides, a lot of time, a lot of resources. But it does mean that when they get out the back end of that process, our guides are phenomenal. They know everything they need to know. They know exactly how to talk to the kids. They know exactly what targets they need to hit for curriculum-based stuff. So a lot of time is spent to make sure those tours are as good as possible.
That was going to be my next question, actually, is about the links to curriculum. So you bring the school groups through. Is it focused on getting kids excited about science or actually teaching them?
It's a bit of both. So dinosaurs have been proven in a lot of studies to be a really good vehicle for teaching kids about lots of the aspects of science education. For example, we're rolling out a new program right now where we're focusing on going actually into Canberra schools with boxes of real and replica fossils and talking to kids about what paleontology is, what is a fossil, how does paleontology work, and then what does paleontology actually do in your day-to-day life? How does it link into things that you touch?
Yeah.
So like paleontologists help find oil, help find coal. They help keep track of past climates and future climate change. And then like letting kids know that you don't necessarily need to be a hardcore biologist or paleontologist to do paleontology work. Art, for example, the kids love hearing that art is really important to paleontology.
Art is, as you say, really important to paleontology. It's a science that couldn't exist without art. From the origins of the field, art has been absolutely central to it. That's what one of the main focuses that we have on this podcast is chatting about the art. So, since you mentioned it, tell me about some of the art you've got in and around the museum, and the murals and things.
Yeah, so a lot of our murals were actually done quite a long time ago. I recently found we have a really large hand-painted mural of a Dinosaurus eating a Lambusaurus upstairs.
Yep.
That was done by an artist called Alan Lamb, who used to work at the museum. That was made in 2004, 2005. So about the same. It's about as old as I am now.
What's changed?
Yeah, a lot has changed. But we have both in-house artists who, whenever we need a sketch or a mock-up for, say, I need a silhouette for something, they'll draw me a silhouette.
Mm-hmm.
If we need art for promoting things like trading cards or even coloring sheets, are all mostly done in-house. Sometimes we do send away. We also buy a fair bit of art. So if we need to display something upstairs and we haven't got a good piece that we can draw, we might pull from an artist online. We might buy one of their prints or that kind of thing. We try and make sure that all of the art that we produce is as up to date as possible, which means the poor artists spend a lot of time sitting with me talking about all the anatomical things they need to get correct. And obviously with the great dinosaur renaissance, you have lots of really, really thin, shrink-wrapped dinosaurs. Some of our old art has some representations like that. So anything new that we produce, we try and make sure it is as up to date as we can get it within our area of expertise.
Fat dinosaurs with feathers.
Yeah, absolutely. Fat dinosaurs with feathers. I love me a chunky T-Rex. I love a fat hadrosaur. There's nothing better. But fat, but muscular fat, obviously.
Yeah. Can I talk about the garden for a little bit? Because one thing that we get at this museum that's really interesting to me is there's this sculpture garden outside. I don't know if that's the name you use for it, but is just a space full of dinosaurs in an outdoor sort of naturalistic setting. Some of them chewing on each other and chasing each other. A couple of them chasing jeeps, a la Jurassic Park. But what's the thinking, do you know, with that setup, and how do people react to that space?
I think part of it is that getting kids interested in science is good, but younger kids, particularly kids who are 4 to 6, there's only so much they can actually absorb through reading and listening to their parents. But if they hear that information, they go outside and they have that tactile play experience, it helps them absorb a bit more of the information. On top of that as well, it's just a really cool experience to be able to read about a dinosaur upstairs, go outside and see it, not quite in its natural habitat, but be able to go out and stand next to a replica model, stand next to something that is as close to life size as you're going to get, be able to have that more tactile, physical experience with the dinosaurs. We find, especially with younger school groups, our pre to roughly year 1, that having them go out to the garden helps them actually absorb and internalize all the information more. Play is really important for younger kids learning. I have a bit of a background in psych. I studied a bit at uni, and through that, one of the most important things they note is that a lot of learning by young kids is done through play, through hands-on interaction, physical, interactive, working with the world around them. So our garden's really great for that. It's also just pretty cool. Stand out the front, obviously, our really big T-Rex. He's nowhere near accurate. He's way too big for life size, but it just looks cool. It looks sick. So.
He's definitely intimidating, that T-Rex. Speaking of the garden and the art, let's combine those two. One of the triceratops out the front, am I right that it gets like a regular paint job update?
Yes. So we call that triceratops Paintosaurus internally. It gets different names depending on. So we paint that dinosaur seasonally. So we started this last year with Florosaurus for Florian, who will hopefully be making a return again this year. We paint it for Halloween. We paint it for Christmas. We painted it most recently for Pride Month, hence the rainbow coloration.
Yep.
We also painted it for Easter and things like that. So that's one of our dinosaurs that obviously doesn't have a very accurate coloration, but it's fun. Kids love it. It's really, really, it's a really good photo op as well.
Yeah.
And it's just a bit of fun for our staff as well. They get a chance to go out and do a really funny, cool, fun little paint job on a dinosaur.
Yeah. I saw it a couple of years ago and I think it had zebra stripes on there.
Yeah.
So it was black and white. That was quite a cool design. It's the National Dinosaur Museum. It's based here in Canberra, and specifically it's at the edge of Canberra in a small suburb called Gold Creek, which itself is a kind of little attraction-based suburb, right? There's the reptile museum. There's a few other things around Gold Creek to kind of bring tourists in. But what's it like being out here as opposed to, at the center of a capital city or a major city like Sydney or something like that?
It means that the museum is kind of split into two wings.
Yeah.
So we have our educational wing. That's pretty constant throughout the year. Obviously, earlier in the year, term 1, you don't get a whole lot of tours coming through. But Canberra is one of the only places in Australia where almost every school will bring a group of kids at least once every 2 years. So in that sense, we have a pretty constant flow of schools coming through. And being as far out as we are, there's actually a accommodation up the road that does schools. So they don't mind school kids coming to us because it's something they can do at nighttime. We have our night tour programs. There's very few places that actually offer a educational and fun experience after like 5 or 6 p.m. Canberra obviously is a city that goes to bed very, very early most of the time.
Especially in winter.
Especially in winter. So the schools love it because it's something fun, but also they have an educational component to it. The kids do learn things. They learn about science, they learn about dinosaurs. And they also get to explore our museum with some of the lights dimmed down and a bit more of a spooky environment. So that's one half of our operations is getting those education, those tours coming through. The other half is tourism, which obviously it swings and it booms and it busts depending on how well the tourism sector is doing at that time, things like fuel prices, that kind of thing. We find we get really big influxes during school holidays, particularly in winter with ski season happening, and most people are traveling to Canberra in winter, not many people going out to the beach during the colder periods of the time. So we find we have really big periods around our school holidays when kids are available and they're begging their parents to go see dinosaurs. So we have really big periods and we have quiet periods in between where we focus on schools and our day-to-day operations.
Is there anything coming up? Anything you want to let us in on that's, a new tour or exhibition or anything little secret that
We have a few things coming up. We have a very exciting skeletal we're working on. I can't leak the species yet, but I believe it is one of 2 or one of 3 in Australia when it's done.
Okay.
Hopefully, if all goes well, it will be, it is a replica skeletal, but it will hopefully be finished and prepped, hopefully by next year. So that is in the works and hopefully coming. We are rolling out a new tour program. So speaking as we were earlier about being in Gold Creek, it's really hard for Canberra schools to come to us because they would have to get a bus. It's a long travel for them. So we're in the middle of rolling out a new program right now. We're trialing it actually next week of going out to Canberra schools and taking our fossils with us and doing talks inside school grounds. So kids don't have to leave, but they can still get that experience of actually being at the museum. So that's rolling out quite soon, hopefully. And we have our Floriade programs coming up as well. So this year's Floriade theme, I believe, is flowers and feast. So it's focused on how flowering plants help with food production, things like grains and fruits. And we got quite lucky. A new paper came out not that long ago about they pushed back large fruits to a little bit earlier in the Cretaceous instead of post-Cretaceous. So we're doing a talk about how angiosperms flowering plants evolved, and we have some really cool fossils that haven't been shown to the public before out of our vault. Going to go come up for those talks and people be able to get hands-on interactive with them. And lucky last, our yearly adults only Halloween tour to be running again this year come Halloween time.
It'll be exciting. I only live 15 minutes up the road now, so I'll be here for that one. We had a chat a couple of months ago, my co-host and I, and we talked about the best dinosaur-inspired food or meals that you could eat. So we're not talking about Triceratops burgers in the Floriade feast.
No, unfortunately, we don't serve any food on site. Or fortunately for the staff, I don't think they would not be happy if I told them we had to start a catering business. But in saying that, we have had some really interesting questions, particularly from kids recently. They're being very curious about how dinosaurs would taste, which is a bit of a tricky question to answer. The consensus seems to be that some dinosaurs may have been more meatier, so you might have things that are closer to like game meat, like elk or deer.
Yeah.
And the other camp is obviously, well, they probably might taste more like crocodile or bird. And then it's hard to tell a kid exactly what a T-Rex would taste like without tasting it. We can do a bit better with the mammoth. Obviously, they made that big mammoth meatball and carved the chunk out of it. Apparently, that wasn't very good.
Something at the top of the food chain like a T-Rex is probably going to have accumulated heavy metals on it. It wouldn't actually be that tasty.
Yeah,
probably
absolutely.
possibly dangerous to it.
Yeah, it's like any sort of prey, any sort of predator animal, even like coyote meat, I've heard tastes horrible, and fox and things like that. So we do tell them, like, it's probably not going to taste very good, whatever it is. They're big and they're muscular, and it's like eating a big lizard. They're going to be pretty tough.
Yeah.
So
can I just ask a little bit more about your background? How did you come to be working here?
So I moved to Canberra in 2023 for university. I come from a very, very small town. Originally, I was studying psych at uni, but I've always loved dinosaurs since I was a little kid. I adored them. Jurassic Park is my favorite movie. It's my favorite book. I just love them. But the idea of chasing a career in paleontology for someone like me, I come from a very poor background in a very small town. I only got to uni because I got a bunch of scholarships. So I was able to move to Canberra because of that. So the idea of chasing paleontology, which is notoriously not a very high paying career, was something I just couldn't fathom. And then I needed a bit of extra money, and I was looking around for part-time jobs, and I happened to stumble across a tour guide position here, jumped on it, got it immediately, luckily. And then I've been here ever since. I've been here since this time, actually. It's probably actually my 3-year anniversary of working here.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, I think. So
Nice.
I've shot my way up quite quickly, but
Yeah.
I started actually out in our garden doing just our garden work, and now I moved into tours, and now I'm running our tour segment. But I just love dinosaurs, and now I'm shifting my studies across to focus more on biology and paleontology. I'm decided I'm going to chase it, even if it's not going to pay me as well as maybe a psych career might have.
Well, look, if you're working here, I think it makes sense. I can see the passion, and I can see the knowledge coming through, which is fantastic. And there are some reasonably well-known paleontologists that have had associations with this museum. One you might know is Sally Hurst.
Yes, absolutely.
Who I've interviewed. Sally's fantastic, and she's out there doing great things. So yeah, I think even though it's a small museum, it's maybe not a part of those established traditional pathways. It offers opportunity and it offers inspiration, and really that's what we're all about. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll get there one day, through thick or through thin. So
best of luck, mate. Thanks for having a chat with me on Fossils and Fiction.
Thank you.
Let's go and check out the dinos, hey?
Absolutely. This is our Cretaceous room. So obviously this is the third period our dinosaurs lived in. This is probably the room that our kids find second most exciting after T-Rex. Primarily that is because of this out here. This is our Kronosaurus. Now, obviously, this model is not a very accurate Kronosaurus. It's about 10 years old now. Even at the time, it wasn't phenomenal. The main problems are obviously the head, so the skull shape. Kronosaurus as an abelisaur has quite a narrow and quite a shallow skull. Ours is a bit too long, not quite as squished up, not quite as pug-like. The arms are also really actually egregiously bad on this animatronic. So Kronosaurus arms are supposed to be one single socket. They don't have an elbow. They just spin around in the joints. They also have 4 fingers, not 3, but they haven't got really long claws like this model. And the arms themselves are also too big, proportionally to the model. So real Kronosaurus arms are only like 30 centimeters. Nowhere near as big as this fella's here. He's way too big. But the legs on this model are actually weirdly quite correct. So Kronosaurus, they're built like a rugby front rower. They've got a lot of muscle in their legs. They used to think top speed was 56 kilometers an hour. I believe there's been a bit of, as of this year, a little bit of disagreement on whether that paper is still correct. Maybe closer to 40 k's an hour. So not quite as fast as something as like Struthiomimus over there. It was a bit thinner, a bit more narrow, a bit more streamlined, but still pretty quick for I think it's a 1.7 ton animal now. So they're pushing it. And then Dinosuchus, this was the artwork I was telling you about. It's a really, really good piece of art. We actually originally thought that it was a print, but we found the original documents and the drawings of it in a safe downstairs. So it's a really phenomenal piece of art, our Dinosuchus here. I don't think it's considered quite to be that big anymore. I believe they're a bit smaller than that artwork would tell you now. I think it's 7 meters. My own sign will tell me. Yeah, about 10 meters long. There you go. But only about 5 tons now instead of that 8 to 9 they were previously.
That is definitely an impressive piece of artwork.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Alan did it all by hand in 2004, I believe. So he spent hours and hours. He has a DeviantArt actually now, and on that DeviantArt he has a comment on it saying like he's not very good at painting, he wasn't a very good painter. And you look at that and you go, well, if he's not a very good painter, what am I? Yeah. So no, it's such a phenomenal piece of art. He did a really, really good job. A lot of our stuff like this was done by him. He's got some sketches downstairs that are quite good as well. We have our ceratopsian skulls as well. Weirdly enough, we don't actually have a trike skull. We have Enchyceratops, who is actually a little bit denser than something like a Triceratops, at least for their size. I believe current theory suggests that possibly they were semi-aquatic. And then Pachyrhinosaurus, who is quite iconic. The nasal boss, the singular brow horn. So the 2 brow horns and the singular horn up the top. Pachyrhino is one of my favorite ceratopsians. They're so weird, but I love them dearly. They're very cool. And Ichthyosaurus. So I can't remember the name of this fossil. It's escaping me. It's one of the most famous though, aside from the one that has the fossilized cloaca attached. This is I believe the one mother and the bunch of small children. Ichthyosaurus is a favorite of a couple of our guides. They really like it for some reason. Our rooms are organized by time period, so we start Triassic and move through, except for in this section of the museum here. So we have our marine section back there, and we have our Australia section. The only dinosaur that is not in this room is actually our Canberrasaurus, who's all the way back in our Cretaceous. Otherwise, almost all of our Australian dinosaurs are kept in this one room. Now, some of these models were accurate until quite recently. Our Muttaburrasaurus has probably suffered the worst. Again, they found the extra length of snout, so Muttaburrasaurus' nasal snout has moved up. I believe on top of that, though, they might have actually discovered salinity glands, so they think maybe they were holding salt, suggests maybe more of a semi-aquatic diet. And they got way, way bigger recently as well. I think they're pushing somewhere close to 8 tons now at the maximum end. So they're quite big, quite dense. We have Kronosaurus here, who's missing a few feathers. He's a little bit too scaly. He's quite old. But I have a soft spot for Kronosaurus. It's a really, really silly dinosaur name. The only dinosaur, I believe, in the entire world named after an airline company. So very silly. The kids love him. They also love Lianosaur. Again, our model is missing the tail feathers that you often have Lianosaur depicted with now. Kind of like a Psittacosaurus, little feathers on the back. Lianosaurus, has really cool origin story for the name. Patton Tom Vickers Rich, their young daughter, begged her parents for a dinosaur for Christmas. Really, really wanted one. Lucky for her, she has maybe the only parents in Australia who could deliver her a dinosaur. I think some sources say that maybe she helped dig it out. I couldn't verify that, but she definitely was at the dig site the day it was discovered. She got her own dinosaur. Her brother, not to be outdone, got his own dinosaur, but his is that one singular femur there, Tim Mimus. Well, then saying that, Tim Mimus is still cool. At the time, it represented the first possible evidence of a tyrannosauroid. Now, knowing what we know about megaraptors, that they are quite possibly tyrannosauroids in them of themselves, it's possible Tim Mimus represents a femur of a very small megaraptor.
I hope you enjoyed that interview. If you ever get down here to Canberra, I think it's well worth spending an hour or two out at the Australian National Dinosaur Museum out in the Gold Creek Village. And there's lots of other things to do in Gold Creek as well. So it's definitely a tourist precinct worth a visit. There's one thing we didn't mention in the interview, and I didn't mention in the lead up, which is there's actually a display there, which is really cool. And it's like Othniel Charles Marsh's camp. So it's set up to look like his camp from the Bone Wars era. And there's a sort of a frame that's got a mounted dinosaur hanging on it. And it's kind of drawings hung out. So it looks like this kind of Old West research camp of O.C. Marsh. And I've never seen anything like that at another museum. So I think it's actually a really cool addition to that kind of space.
I mean, we talk all the time about when I've gone to do outreach at schools, the kids often want to know what the typical day in the life of a paleontologist is like. And I think in the same way that you're talking about these museums bringing paleontology to people who may not otherwise have had many opportunities to learn about the realities of the field. When I first got down here, one of the first things I did was go to the Museum of South Australia, where they've got a replica of Mawson's base camp in in Antarctica set up. And I had never really thought before about the realities of Antarctic exploration in that time period and how difficult it would have been. And I think, comparing and contrasting the way that fieldwork would have been done in Othniel Marsh's time with the way that we would do it today is so interesting to think about. And we do actually have a lot of those scenes kind of immortalized by these drawings that were done by different members of Cope and Marsh's teams at the time. There are actually these very lovely little watercolors and, of them dynamiting the bone beds or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, let's not get into the politics of the Bone Wars and what was good and bad about that era. But I just think it's a really nice, immersive little display that they've got going on there that kind of shows that history of paleontology, which again, you might not expect walking into that type of museum. Alyssa, before we move on, I have another story for you.
Go on.
And that is that at the end of last year, I went on a game show, which is, I think it runs in the UK and Australia and a bunch of other countries, and it's called The Chase. So if you know The Chase, what you do is a general knowledge quiz show. Each member of the team is given 2 minutes to answer as many questions as they can as a form of cash builder. And after that, then they have to face off to the chaser in a kind of head-to-head battle to get back to the board and be safe with the cash that they've earned.
Okay.
Now, I went on The Chase. I got $10,000 in the cash builder, which I wasn't happy with. I was aiming for 16 or something. I wanted more than 10. But nonetheless, that worked and worked. I step up to the board to face the chaser, who was Issa Schultz, who's known as the super nerd on the Australian edition of The Chase.
Amazing.
And we started asking questions. I know, it was great. It was like a lot of fun. They started asking questions, and one of the questions was, which family of tusked mammals is the stegodon part of?
Oh.
And yeah, so the stegodon is a is a paleontology creature. And what I've noticed, and I hadn't twigged to this before, but what I've noticed since is, if somebody goes in and talks about a special interest of, if they have a special interest in their introduction and they talk about it a little bit, there actually does tend to be a question in the chase moment that kind of leans on the special interest. So this is something, as I say, I've noticed afterwards, after having been on the show, that there nearly always is a question there that actually in some way relates to the things that they were talking about in the introduction. So I feel like that's a deliberate strategy that they undertake, the producers. But I don't have any inside knowledge. It's just from my own observations. Anyway, so they asked me this question of stegodon, and I thought, I have to get this right as the host of a paleo podcast. But I did not know the answer. I did not know the answer at all.
I don't know the answer.
And I was running through the logic of, is this related to Stegosaurus somehow with the stego bit? But I couldn't figure out how exactly. No, I knew it was a mammal. The answers, the options, the options that they gave me were mammals. So I knew it was a mammal. I knew it wasn't a dinosaur. But I was trying to figure out where did the word stego, where did that fit into stegodon and Stegosaurus, and what was the link there? And so what it turns out is I was kind of right on following that logic, but I was wrong on what the word stego means. So in short, the word stego in Stegosaurus means plate.
Yes.
And in stegodon, it also means plate, but it refers to plate tooth or flat tooth. And it's referring to the type of teeth that the stegodon has. The stegodon is an elephant, essentially, an ancient elephant. So it has big, broad, flat teeth, and the others were just various other tusked mammals. So I got the answer right. I got the answer right, but my logic was completely wrong, and so now I'll always remember what stego refers to as a result of that.
Amazing. And the same thing is true for Stegocanthus, which is that shark that my friend recently pointed out looks like it's got an AWACS on it, like the anti-aircraft thing they put on airplanes. And in that case, the stego is talking about the weird teeth that are on the growth on the back of this shark.
Yeah.
But I would not have known stegodon because mammals are not my bag.
No. Another reason to mention that is that there is I think it's a replica, not a real, but there's a life-size stegodon fossil in the National Dinosaur Museum.
There you go. It all came back around in the end. That's beautiful. Well, talking about Marsh's camp from before and the need to survive, I'll make segues out of anything. We have a new movie that's come out that, to me, I haven't seen it yet, but to me, strikes me as somewhere between, like, 65 and, like, The Mist, that Stephen King adaptation. Can you tell us a little bit about this movie?
So, The End of Oak Street. As we say, this is a kind of preview discussion, and I really want to hear from the audience what you think about this film if you've gone to see it. And we might do a little bit more of a review. I'm planning to go early next week, so we'll have a bit more of a review then after the next episode. But The End of Oak Street, what I like about this, we talked about having more dino media. Great. It's also proper Hollywood studio, so there's money behind it. I've seen some people having gripes, but having money behind dino media is also good because it means that they can take some risks, hopefully, but also produce dinosaurs that look cool. And I know there's a lot of debate out there. There's sort of paleo fans who argue about the specificity and the accuracy of certain types of dinosaurs. I'm not going to get into that. Maybe I'll get into it after I've actually seen the film. I've seen a bit of this debate online. But effectively, this is not giving anything away. This is from the trailer. The End of Oak Street is about a neighborhood called Oak Street, which is kind of transported one night back to the Cretaceous period. And as a result of that, the residents of the neighborhood need to survive suddenly with dinosaurs prowling around. It's got Anne Hathaway and Ewan McGregor amongst the cast. There's also a dog called Starbuck, which is kind of a nod to Moby Dick, I think, which is that's where that name came from. So yeah, it looks like a cool film, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it. But seeing how the residents survive, who gets killed, who survives, all the good stuff about dinosaurs and humans interacting on screen.
That's right. And one of the things that I think was also really cool about this movie in the lead up to it, one of the things that makes me a little bit more eager to see it is that when they faced criticism for using generative AI in their advertisements, they did respond by taking those ads down, which to me is, it's different than if you were to do the whole film in generative AI, which they are not saying they did, but to have put out the advertisement, seen the backlash and gone, you know what? Maybe not. Maybe this is not what people are interested in. I think that's a much more interesting way to handle using AI in movies today. And I just want to see Ewan McGregor fight a dinosaur. I've always been saying that. I haven't always been saying that. But I will now be saying that. I want to see the guy from Train Spotting punch a dinosaur in the face. You cannot defeat me, Velociraptor. I have the high ground. You were the chosen one.
That's fantastic. I love
and then
it.
It's just screeching in response, just, as they do.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what
That's
the
our
people want
preview.
to see.
That's our preview of the end of Oak Street. So yeah, let us know what you think, and we'll share some of those comments on the next episode of Fossils
And
and
instead
Fiction.
of just imagining the movie, you can tell us what we should imagine. No, I'll go see it too. Yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Don't forget to check out our merch. Someday, if we ever launch a Kickstarter, maybe, we'll direct our own dinosaur movie, or we'll finally talk about the Bone Wars. We'll dig up Othniel Marsh and interview him. That's what we'll do.
Yeah. That sounds like a great idea. Let's exhume O.C. Marsh.
Yeah, it can't be a crime. I think his brain is preserved at the Smithsonian or something if the legends are true. So,
exactly.
It's not even a whole corpse.
Hey, look, folks, we're trying to keep the podcast ad-free from now on. If you'd like to help us do that, please consider subscribing, becoming a member of the podcast. It'll also help us make more episodes and more fun stuff as well. So jump onto our Fourth Wall store, buy some merch, or sign up as a member.
That's right. You can get yourself a nice Fossils and Fiction sticker. It looks just like our logo. It's bright, it's vibrant, it's by a local Melbourne artist. And you can tell your friends that you listen to two very cool nerds describe what they think a movie will be like to you, and also the cool game show they went on. So, lots of things going on there. And feel free to drop comments, tell us your thoughts and feelings. Dreams and aspirations also welcome. And thank you for joining us. Hopefully we'll see you in the next one. Fossils and Fiction.